Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. So excited and ecstatic to be joined by Les. He's a drummer, he's a multi-instrumentalist. He has performed with the likes of LIL KIM, Prince, New Power Generation, as well as big artists that you all know. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be joined by him. Thank you so much.
Well, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So we always like to go back a little bit in time and just find out how you even got interested in music and then ultimately picked your instrument as your passion.
Well, I've been playing since I was 2 years old.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh.
In a household full of musicians. Both my parents are great musicians as well,
right.
And my brothers. And I always tell people that, I think music chose me. I didn't really choose it.
Okay.
And I just kind of listened to it, So the love was definitely just from the very beginning. And there was no question about anything else.
Right.
I knew from day one, this was it.
It almost was day one.
Yeah, exactly.
Day 700 or something of that nature. Who were some of those musicians and some of those sounds that inspired you?
Oh man, musicians, the list goes on. It's like a bag of Lay's chips, right? You just can't have just one. So, far as a drummer, I will start there that John Blackwell is a huge inspiration, as well as my best friend and teacher who taught me and got me started.
Right.
As well as Matthew Jones, who many may not know, but he's responsible for a lot of my training and education as far as reading, but from there on out, Billy Cobham, Dennis Chambers, Tony Williams, and then we get into artists, Prince, Michael Jackson, you name it, Marvin Gaye, Bill Withers,
Legends.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How did you find your sound and your instrument? Like you said, over time, you've been able to pick up tons of instruments. I've seen you on the piano, I've seen you play the guitar. I know you can play the bass, and then of course the drums. But how did you really decide, okay, this is something I'm actually going to play? Because like you said, you had musicians in the family, but picking an instrument can be hard, at least starting off.
That's a tricky one, because my mother, she was a choir director and a vocal coach, and she would take me around with her when she's doing these workshops.
Right.
And I believe my god brother, I think it started there, he would babysit me, and he was playing drums in high school.
Right.
He would sit me in his lap and just kind of guide me around. And my parents came to pick me up one day, and they tried to grab the drumsticks from me.
Right.
And I lost my mind.
Oh no.
And that's when they said, okay, we might need to look at this.
Sure.
They got me this little baby toy drum set from this music store, and I broke it.
Oh, wow.
So then they brought it back to the store. The same guy that sold them that one said, hey, here's another one just like that.
Oh, nice.
If he breaks this one, bring it back, let me see it. 2 weeks later, it was broken. And they brought it back, and they said, that's a drummer, start lessons right now.
Wow, nice.
And that's where it took off from there.
Off to the races, sure. What were some of those key moments that you felt? It might have been a teacher, it might have been your parents or somebody that was training you that helped sort of guide you to those larger opportunities?
Oh man, I want to start off by saying definitely having a teacher, just in anything you're doing. Having someone guide you along the way is very instrumental, especially someone that has been where you're trying to go.
Right.
So when you have opportunities that show up, they can actually tell you from their experience how they handle certain things. And not that you have to do it the way they did it, but at least you have a blueprint to learn the do's and the don'ts. So that's number one, I believe. And just involve yourself in as many musical situations that you can be in. Don't limit yourself from any environment that you could grow in. Because there's so many things you can learn.
Sure.
So be a my friend used to say, my brother used to say, have an empty cup.
Yes, I like that.
Never keep a cup full.
Right. What was that key moment where you felt, I've arrived, I'm on my way now?
I never had that moment.
Okay, and that's okay. I've heard that answer before, and sometimes it's good it keeps people hungry.
Yeah, I've never had that moment of I've arrived. I think for me, if I ever have that moment, I need to stop.
Okay.
You know, I don't think even the people that we look up to or admire, I don't think in their minds they have arrived. You know, a lot of them are they're still reaching for a higher plateau as well.
Sure.
So if anything, I just, you know, keep the mindset of being grateful.
Absolutely, sure.
You know?
What was one of those early, or maybe your first break, your first big break?
First big break, definitely Larry Graham.
Yes.
Prince auditioned me to be Larry Graham's drummer. And that was my freshman year in college. So I'm at Berklee College of Music during this time.
Yes.
And that's when everything really kicked off for me. Was from Larry Graham, then to Patti Labelle, Roberta Flack, also as well as Prince, and you know, the list goes on. ANITA BAKER, and you know,
Sure.
It started with Larry.
Right. Okay. So let's walk through that now. You take us through the scenario of getting an audition. I mean, you're at Berklee. It is super competitive. I'm very familiar with that school in the Northeast, one of the best music schools. You're focused on the work that you're doing. You're probably not sending out demo tapes. You're probably not making videos on Instagram. So how do they find you, and how does this audition come to be?
Well, my teacher, John Blackwell Jr, was Prince's drummer, and he was playing with Larry Graham when he was off with Prince. So there was a point of time where they both had conflicting dates. So Prince said, okay, I need my drummer back, but we got to find Larry a drummer. So right away, my mentor said, hey, talk to my protege. And he showed him a VHS tape. Okay. You know, and this is
had back then. I know. I figured it wasn't MP3.
So he showed him this tape of me playing, and Prince calls me on my birthday.
Wow.
And he asked me 4 questions.
Okay.
Do you drink? No. Do you smoke? No. Do you have kids? No. Are you married? No. Okay. We're sending you a plane ticket in the mail. So the next day I'm at Paisley Park.
Wow.
And Prince is, you know, just relaxed, calm, you know, tells me to get situated on the drum set. He grabs the bass, and we just start having fun.
He himself, exactly.
Yeah.
One of his typical jam sessions.
Exactly.
That he's known to do.
Yeah. And then an hour or so later, Larry Graham comes in the room. Prince throws him the bass and grabs a guitar, and we're just rocking out, just playing everything.
Sure.
And they wanted to see how well I can hang.
Exactly.
You know, and they like what they heard, and they said, hey, you're on the gig.
Sure. So we still got to unpack that, because these are some of the, I mean, one of the greatest bass players ever. And I know when I saw you did a tribute to Mr. Blackwell, so I know that he literally meant the world to you.
Yeah.
So appreciate you bringing him up. Just even getting that phone call, we're going to go through it step by step. Most people would not necessarily even believe that it's a real call. They might think it's one of their friends. Talk to us about sort of what was going through your head step by step.
What was going through my head? I knew it was him, so I didn't think it was a prank. I know some would think so, because there's a lot of stories where he will prank call you.
Right, sure, yes.
Yeah.
And you knew it was him because?
I just knew. I just knew. You know, just from what I've heard from John, you know, stories he would share with me, I said, okay, I kind of got a feel of how he moves. And actually, I left this out. Takumi, who was Prince's guitar tech, he wears many hats. So actually, he called first and then put Prince on the phone. And so I had a good relationship with him. So that's also another way that I knew, you know, it was legit.
Sure, absolutely. And then what was it like actually arriving there, you know, under these reasons? Because everybody sort of, in their minds at least, is told to prepare for that big moment, that key audition or things like that. But it doesn't usually happen at a place so auspicious. And so walk us through that of sort of going out to Minnesota and going to Paisley Park and all that you were sort of seeing and vibing with even before you got to see Prince.
Actually, it's kind of a blur because all I remember is just showing up at the front door of Paisley Park.
Right.
And he's right there greeting me at the door.
Right. Wow.
You know, and he's kind of sizing me up, checking me out, like, okay, all right, young gun, okay. And that was really it. I didn't really think of anything, or nothing came to mind out of the ordinary, or I wasn't nervous, or it was just, let's have some fun.
Right. Sure.
You know, and I try to live in a way of just, things are going to be what they're going to be. You know, so whatever comes from this, then that's what it's supposed to be.
Right. And then just talk to us a little bit about that jam session itself. You felt like, okay, I'm following a lead, I'm doing my thing, I like to ad lib, I recognize where he's going.
Definitely. A lot of listening, you know, because we don't know what's going to happen. We're just, and that's the beauty of jam sessions, is, you know, nothing is rehearsed. It's all about just using your instincts, your musical intuition, and just really listening to what everyone else is doing around you and how to respond, you know, to what they're doing. And it was great. I think it didn't hit me until a few weeks later that, wait a minute, I was just playing with Prince and Larry Graham together. It didn't hit me till later.
I was wondering when the pitch me moment came.
Yeah, because to be honest, I'm not a starstruck person, you know, so, but when it goes back to being grateful, that's where I said, not many will have opportunities like that to share, you know, in that way with two giants. You know, so yeah, that hit me a few weeks after. Yeah.
And this tells us a little bit about sort of the logistics of, you were in school at the time, you've got, it sounds like, get on tour right away, and that whole prep, because often there isn't a lot of time, and while you're well versed in playing lots of different things, you may not have realized, okay, I'm going to be playing with Grand Central in a week or in a few days. What little time did you have to prep, and how did that go?
Not a lot of time to prep. I know Blackwell just told me to absorb as much of the music as I can. Like, so right away, I just got all the Graham Central Station CDs, all the Sly records. I'm just soaking up as much as I can, not knowing what's going to happen as far as, okay, Larry could tell me anything. So I just wanted to be as ready as I could, and the best way is just to listen to all the catalog. You know, and then once I got a list of what he wanted to do for the shows, then that's when I dug in there sweating, practicing every day. You know, because playing with Larry is like training for the Olympics. You know, you got to have your stuff together.
Absolutely. And what was that like in terms of the amount of time? Because I think a lot of times people lose or may not be aware of how many hours you're putting in almost on a daily basis to prep for something like that, going on a major tour with an artist that you've only signed with maybe a few days or a few weeks before.
Well, we will rehearse for weeks. Like, I remember before the first run, we spent at least 2 or 3 weeks rehearsing every day, from like 10 a.m. till about midnight. Every day. We may have 2 breaks in between, but Monday through Saturday, we're in there sweating all day, every day, nothing else. And when you get back to the hotel room, we don't want to do anything but sleep. So that's what it was. Sundays were the only day that we had off. You know, just to really get in there. And I'm talking about sore. Man, I mean, there was places I was sore and I didn't know I had. You know, but that's the hard work. You know, and he's giving it to you. I mean, he's acting like he's 21 years old. You know, just full of energy.
Amazing. And so how did that evolve into some of the artists that you also got to work with, simply with them opening and or being recommended?
Yeah, a lot of things came from recommendation, word of mouth, as well as or seeing me with someone else performing. Roberta Flack, and I mean, the list goes on. Patti Labelle was connected, you know, via John Blackwell as well. who he used to tour with prior to Prince.
Sure.
And Yeah, everything's been word of mouth, really. You know, just the way the industry goes.
Right.
You know,
sure.
either they see you somewhere or someone say, "Hey, call this guy."
Right.
So there hasn't been a distinct connection between all the people
Right.
I've worked with,
Pretty
you know,
much.
in that way.
With New Power Generation versus Prince, was there a time where you were with the group after or before? How did that whole time frame that you got to work with them go?
Well, New Power Generation is actually not what you see today.
Right, exactly.
New Power Generation really is a whole family of musicians that Prince has used over the years after the revolution.
Sure.
So when you put the list of musicians together, that's
ginormous. Exactly.
it's
right.
humongous.
Sure.
So there really isn't a distinct separation per se from the actual NPG and then
Right.
Prince.
Okay.
You know, so NPG's pretty much been NPG
Right.
the whole time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And were there some times that you actually got to do performances with him as well?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. You know, when Blackwell was alive
Right.
and working with him, I would, you know, fill in for him.
Right.
You know, and sometimes it'll be Larry, you know, with him, and then Larry will open up, and then I'll be there for that as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And talk to us about doing that. So not only meeting two giants, but then also trying to do a show for two artists like that give so much.
Oh, it's the same thing. It's just, you know, a lot of sweat,
Right.
a lot of work. You know, you got to have your stuff together.
Right.
You know, got to do your homework. Definitely, it goes quick.
Sure.
You know, but once it's over, you're like, what just happened?
Right.
It's like, how did all this happen in such a fast period of time?
Sure. Is there a favorite Prince story? Many people have one.
I definitely have one that sticks out. We were in Vegas when he was doing 3121 Club.
Yes. Okay.
And I think, was it Maceo? We did a couple of shows, and one of them was with Maceo and another one was with Morris Day. But we were in sound check. Now, we rehearsed for 2 weeks for this show.
Right.
Larry Graham. We're in sound check, and we're towards the end of sound check.
Right.
Prince comes up on the microphone. Everybody stop. And we're looking around like, okay, I promise you, we have a 2-hour show.
Right.
He changed everybody's part on every song. Mind you, we spent weeks rehearsing this stuff. He wants to change everything the day of the show.
Right, and hours before the show. Yes.
Hours before the show.
Exactly.
So we're in sound check longer than planned.
Right.
Because now we have to remember all these parts and forget what we rehearsed.
Right.
So when he comes around to me, we were doing the jam, and he tells me, "Les, play harder."
And what does he mean by that?
Just hit the drums louder,
Right, sure.
play, just, you know, I'm already hammering away.
Right.
But he's like, just go ape style,
Right,
just
sure.
gorilla the drums.
Right.
And I said, okay, going in. And I break a drumstick. The stick that breaks, the broken piece bounces off my drum. It hits Larry in the back of the head. But I see it like in my mind, it's in slow motion, because I'm like, please don't hit Larry. Please don't hit Larry. And then boom, I'm like, I'm going home. I'm going home. The whole band stopped.
Oh, wow.
They're looking at me like, oh boy. So Prince says, Les, you do realize that wood's not meant to be broken. And I'm like, are you asking me?
Right, exactly.
Or telling? Am I supposed to respond? Like, is that a rhetorical? Like, I don't know how to, what, you know.
Sure.
So then he says, do you want to know why? So I'm like, he must be playing with me, because if wood's not meant to be broken, half the stuff on this stage came from a tree. It's like the guitar amps, the drums. So, and meanwhile, I looked over,
Right.
Larry's cracking up.
Of course.
So now I'm like, okay, they're messing with me.
Right.
So then Prince goes around and says, if you want to be louder, that's why we have the sound man to turn you up. I was like, you just told me to play harder.
Right. Exactly.
So I was like, I want to throw a drum or something. I'm like, you just told me.
Exactly.
But that's like one of my iconic Prince memories,
Yeah.
you know, where he was just playing around.
Exactly,
you know?
of course. I hear that all, many
Yeah.
times. Also, I got a sense or heard that he was someone who would kind of go by the vibe and the feel and the setting and the mood sort of the day, and that's why often, although there was lists developed, things would often change up shortly before a performance.
Yeah, definitely. That's very true. You know, he definitely is a vibe person in that way. You know, he'll fill the room out, and you know, he'll just roll with what feels right.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Obviously, another giant, Patti LaBelle. What was it like to work with her? What's it like to be in her presence?
Oh man, Patti LaBelle, I always say to people, I don't think anyone can go on the microphone behind her because she gives it 1,000,000%.
Right.
Every time. It can be a slow song, a fast song. She's eating that microphone up, not holding anything back.
Right.
It's great, and she's someone that immediately you want her to be your auntie.
Right. Wow.
You know, it's just her energy. You know, she's beautiful, she's a sweetheart, and she wants you to give it to her.
Right. Literally.
You know, she wants you to really kick her in the back.
Right.
You know.
Right. Back up. Now, that's a tremendous juxtaposition if we talk about somebody, let's say, like LIL Kim. And what did you find in terms of some of the elements that she brought to the table, just in terms not only of her performance style, but just in the kind of performance you would give for her?
LIL Kim, that was a special situation because we were her very first band that she'd ever had.
Right.
She's never worked with a band ever, and and in the era that she came up in, it was all about turntables anyway.
Exactly. Right.
You know, so a good friend of mine named Veronica, who was her background singer, posed the idea that, hey, you know, Snoop Dogg has a band.
Right.
Nerd, they have bands.
Right.
DMX had a band.
Right.
They're like, yo, you should have a band too.
Right. Sure.
So, me being a musical director, you know, because I do service a lot of artists and put bands together for them.
Right.
And they said, hey, call Les.
Right.
You know, and I put together a crew.
Right.
We did probably 2 rehearsals. And then next thing you know, we're in Australia touring.
Wow.
You know, and she's just sweet as pie. You know, we got along really well, and we work really well creatively. You know, a lot of great ideas. So she have an idea, and I'm like, oh, you know what? We could do this with that. You know, so it's a lot of freedom. You know, on that particular situation, where there are some artists where you're kind of there's certain things they want
control,
and nothing outside of this thing.
Right.
With Kim, she just gave you free reign to do whatever you want to do, and she trusted me, you know, with that.
Talking about free reign, I've seen some of your pieces on sort of your selection of certain types of drums and your preferences. How do you sort of make those choices and things like that? Because sometimes you can, and it sounds like sometimes you may not be able to always go with the toms you want.
Well, the beauty of having an endorsement,
Right.
You know, depending on the company that you're with, is a big deal in terms of what can be available when you're traveling.
Right.
So I've been fortunate to be blessed and endorsed with Tama Drums, Vater Drumsticks, Sabian Cymbals, Aquarian Drumheads. Yeah, also Rtom. I'm with them, and a 64 in-ear audio in-ears. Right. And they've serviced me very well. I haven't really had any issues over the years. I can count on one hand the times I might not have been able to get my setup. Right. But because of how big these companies are, I can go anywhere in the world, and I'll have what I need. And if I don't, they'll get really close. Right. You know.
And does that mean that sometimes you have a tech on hand, you do your own setup, you recheck setups? How do you sort of get ready even for the sound check?
Most shows already have their texts, you know, ready to go, and you know, either the venue will have it or the promoter will hire a sound team to come through, and I just tell them what we need, and I'll send a list of, you know, how things look, and they do the best they can to get things sorted. And then of course, you know, when I get there, there'll be a little minor tweaks that we have to make adjustments, but for the most part, 90% of it is already done.
Sure. How do you get yourself ready, especially for some of these big performances, and then maybe having to do a tour?
Definitely, I just absorb the music. I'm kind of one-tracked in that way, where nothing else matters except whatever that is that I'm doing. So I just swim in the music, and besides that, I'm probably doing overtime in the gym. I like that. And you know, and then I kind of just I gravitate more towards those things that inspire me and motivate me, just to keep me in that flow. You know. So that's really it.
Sure. The show's called Music and Medicine. In what way do you feel music has been your medicine?
Music is the one thing in the world I believe that is always there in every season of your life. No matter how old you are, no matter what color you are or what culture you come from, music has always been there. I mean, can you imagine the world if music never existed? What would that look like? You know, so music is just a healer in so many ways, and you can go through relationships, breakups, lose loved ones, you can lose a job, or anything you're going to go through, any storm, music is always there. You know, so to me, that's one of the greatest gifts that I'm grateful for from God, that, you know, we're blessed with to have. You know, it can inspire, you know, talk about mental health, you know, we just went through COVID, right?
So
I mean, without music, how many people, you know, would, I mean, we all struggle through it, but it'll be a lot worse if we didn't have music, just to kind of, you know, lift your spirits. And, you know, there are some songs that have messages in them that are great reminders of not giving up, you know, and to keep hope, you know. So yeah, music is, I mean, it's got me through some hard times for sure. I know it has for you too.
Oh, absolutely, you know? If we looked at your playlist, what might be one or two of those songs that you really feel like, oh man, I'm so thankful that this artist was able to create this song? Or,
oh man, definitely. Do you like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?
Yes, I know the song, yes.
Do you know what song
my
I'm
favorite
going to say?
actor? No, I don't, but it's one of my favorite actors.
So, Pure Imagination is one of my all-time favorite songs in the world, as well as Smile. Those two songs. And there's a song by Ben Tankard.
You did a version of that.
I did that.
Piano, didn't you?
Yeah, I kind of just rearranged my own version of it, but it's called What Kind of World Would It Be? And it's an interlude on his record, but out of his whole record, that song was just, I looped it over and over, because I think that's something that we all should ask ourselves, like, what kind of world would it be if everyone was just like me? What kind of love would I see if what I gave came back to me?
The lyrics.
You know, that alone is just, if you need to put yourself in check, that song would do it.
That's the one. And then where can we find you? What are you up to these days?
Well, definitely starting in 2023, I'll be releasing my debut album. And I'll be starting some shows, some tour shows. So you'll be definitely hearing about that. And my band, LRC Funk, will be backing me up on the things you have yet to see.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to great things, and appreciate all the hard work and all the years you've put in with incredible groups, and just even some of the work you do yourself. When I listen to you, that's always one of the most popular things. Anytime you're on the drums, the photos that you shot, and that was one little plus I wanted to put out there too, that you are always grateful to the photographers. That is not something you see of many artists. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's very important because, you know, I think it's important that they feel recognized as well of their work. You're right, you don't see that too often. And, you know, I just think of it going back to what kind of world would it be? I would want to be recognized for something I did, you know? So I definitely try to pay the love to the artist. And then you never know, that might get them more work and exposure. So.
Right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we've been joined by Les, and an amazing multi-instrumentalist. He's been with so many great artists and gives of himself not only in his performance, but just in his calmness and also in his love for the world and for music. Talking about starting music at the age of 2 is just incredible enough, but he's worked with such great people that I really feel you get that spirit that comes across in the way that he talks and carries himself, to spread more love, spread more happiness, spread more joy, and to realize that the power of music really has the ability to heal us, whether we're going through something like COVID or even now being past it, may still have to deal with hurts, losses, and things in our lives that are difficult. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.